Heart of Darkness. Detailed summary. Joseph Conrad.
Heart of Darkness, written by Joseph Conrad and published in 1899, is a novella that explores the complexities of human nature, imperialism, and moral ambiguity. Set during the height of European colonial expansion in Africa, the story is both a physical journey into the African continent and a psychological journey into the depths of the human soul. The narrative is framed as a story told by Charles Marlowe, a seaman aboard a ship anchored on the River Thames in London. As darkness begins to fall, Marlowe reflects on the history of exploration and conquest, noting that even London was once a dark place before being colonized by the Romans. This observation sets the tone for the story, suggesting that civilization itself may be more fragile than it appears. Marlowe begins recounting his experience as a young man seeking adventure. Fascinated by maps and the blank spaces of the world, he becomes particularly interested in Africa, which he describes as a place of mystery and darkness. Through the influence of his aunt, he secures a job with a Belgian trading company that operates in the Congo. The company is primarily focused on the extraction of ivory, a valuable commodity at the time. Upon arriving in Africa, Marlowe is immediately struck by the contrast between the ideals of imperialism and its brutal reality. He witnesses scenes of suffering and exploitation among the native African population. Workers are chained, exhausted, and dying, abandoned by the very system that claims to bring civilization and progress. The environment itself feels oppressive, with dense jungles and an overwhelming sense of silence and decay. Marlowe travels to the company's outer station, where he meets the chief accountant, a man who appears remarkably composed and well-dressed despite the surrounding chaos. The accountant speaks highly of a man named Kurtz, an exceptional agent who has achieved remarkable success in collecting ivory. Kurtz is described as a prodigy, a man of great talent and ambition, admired by all. Determined to meet this mysterious figure, Marlowe continues his journey deeper into the interior. At the central station, he encounters further inefficiency, corruption, and absurdity. The station manager is a weak and envious man who resents Kurtz's success. Marlowe learns that his steamboat, which he is supposed to command, has been deliberately sabotaged, delaying his journey upriver. This delay heightens the sense of tension and anticipation surrounding Kurtz. As Marlowe repairs the boat, he becomes increasingly fascinated and uneasy about Kurtz. The man is portrayed as both a genius and a potential threat. Rumors suggest that Kurtz has gone beyond the limits of acceptable behavior, becoming something more than a mere agent of the company. Eventually, Marlowe sets off on his journey up the Congo River. This portion of the story is central to the novel's symbolism. The river represents a passage into the unknown, a descent into both the heart of Africa and the darkness within humanity. As the steamboat moves forward, the landscape becomes more primitive and untouched, and the sense of isolation intensifies. During the journey, the crew encounters signs of life along the riverbank's drums, distant figures, and occasional glimpses of the native population. But these interactions are distant and enigmatic. The Africans are portrayed not as individuals, but as a collective presence, emphasizing the alienation felt by the Europeans. At one point, the steamboat is attacked by unseen assailants from the jungle. Arrows are fired and chaos erupts on board. Marlowe's helmsman, an African man, is killed during the attack. Marlowe is struck by the senselessness of the violence and the fragility of life in such an environment. After surviving the attack, the steamboat reaches Kurtz's inner station. There, Marlowe encounters a Russian trader, a young man dressed in colorful, patched clothing, who idolizes Kurtz. The Russian describes Kurtz as a man of immense charisma and influence, capable of commanding both admiration and fear. He reveals that Kurtz has established himself as a powerful figure among the local tribes, who treat him almost as a god. However, the reality of Kurtz's actions is deeply disturbing. Around the station, Marlowe sees human heads mounted on stakes, a clear indication of brutality and domination. Kurtz has abandoned all restraint and moral boundaries, embracing absolute power and indulging his darkest impulses. When Marlowe finally meets Kurtz, he finds a man physically weakened but mentally intense. Kurtz is gravely ill, yet his presence remains overwhelming. He speaks with authority and passion, revealing glimpses of his extraordinary intellect. However, it is clear that he has been consumed by the very environment he once sought to conquer. Kurtz had originally come to Africa with ideals of enlightenment and progress. He even wrote a report for an international society advocating for the civilizing mission of Europeans. Yet at the end of the report, he added a chilling postscript: "Exterminate all the brutes." This contradiction reflects the collapse of his moral integrity. Marlowe becomes both fascinated and horrified by Kurtz. He sees in him a reflection of what any human being might become when freed from the constraints of society. Kurtz's descent into madness represents the ultimate consequence of unchecked power and isolation. As Kurtz's condition worsens, Marlowe attempts to bring him back downriver. During the journey, Kurtz briefly escapes, crawling into the jungle in a final attempt to return to his domain. Marlowe follows him and convinces him to return, demonstrating a strange bond between the two men. Kurtz eventually dies on the steamboat. His final words are among the most famous in literature: "The horror, the horror." These words are interpreted as a moment of self-realization, a recognition of the darkness within himself, and by extension, within humanity. After Kurtz's death, Marlowe returns to Europe, deeply changed by his experience. He feels disconnected from society and disturbed by the superficiality of those around him. The values and illusions of civilization now seem hollow and fragile. Marlowe visits Kurtz's fiancée, known as the Intended, who still believes in Kurtz's greatness and nobility. She is unaware of his true nature and the atrocities he committed. When she asks Marlowe about Kurtz's final words, he chooses to lie, telling her that Kurtz spoke her name instead. This moment highlights one of the central themes of the novella: the role of illusion in maintaining social order. Marlowe's lie preserves the Intended's idealized image of Kurtz, suggesting that truth can be too destructive to confront. Throughout Heart of Darkness, Conrad explores the idea that civilization is only a thin veneer over humanity's darker instincts. The journey into Africa becomes a metaphor for a journey into the subconscious, revealing the potential for savagery within all people. The novella also critiques European imperialism, exposing the hypocrisy and brutality behind the supposed mission of bringing civilization to uncivilized lands. Instead of progress, Marlowe witnesses exploitation, suffering, and moral decay. In the end, Heart of Darkness leaves readers with unsettling questions about human nature, morality, and the true meaning of darkness. Is darkness something external, found in distant lands and unfamiliar cultures? Or is it something that exists within every individual, waiting to emerge under the right conditions? Through Marlowe's journey and Kurtz's tragic downfall, Conrad suggests that the real heart of darkness lies not in Africa, but within the human soul itself.